What do these three people have in common? The high-achieving Year 10 student who's struggling with their confidence as they go into GCSEs. The teacher who's been in post 3 or 4 years who wants to apply for their first management position but doesn't know what to say on the application form. And the head teacher whose workload has doubled because they've taken on a big, unwieldy project. All three of those people could benefit from being listened to, could benefit from exploring their own thinking, could benefit from coming up with some ideas and conclusions of their own in order to take them forward. In short, all three of them could benefit from being coached. My name is Charlie Warshawski and I help schools develop a coaching culture. I do that by coaching students, coaching teachers and school leaders, and also by training school leaders to become coaches. I work with a great team of experienced teachers and head teachers who also are specialist coaches as well, and we work together to help create coaching cultures. And today we're going to talk to you about how to create a coaching culture in a school. You will see from the slide that we're going to look at why, we're going to look at what, and we're going to look at where. We'll also look at how you balance coaching with other skilled approaches to developing individuals within the school. And of course, we will share some tips and ideas, and there'll be some downloads at the end of this presentation. So let's start with this question about coaching cultures. And let's get a definition of what we mean by a coaching culture. You'll see from a slide that we're talking about using coaching deliberately. We're talking about using coaching in a way that has an impact on those who we're going to be coaching, whether they're students, teachers, or fellow leaders. And the idea is that coaching is activated on a regular basis. Most schools we work in, we find that there is already a semblance of a coaching culture taking place. There's already a teacher perhaps who uses coaching approaches in the classroom, a middle leader who uses coaching approaches to managing their team, or a senior leader who regularly coaches his colleagues or her colleagues. So we start from wherever any school is, and we encourage them to grow and develop the coaching culture that they already have in place. Let's get a second definition, a definition of what we mean by coaching. Whenever we run coach training programs, a regular question is, what's the difference between coaching and mentoring? What's the difference between coaching and teaching? Or indeed, what's the difference between coaching and just good management? It's not surprising there's some confusion. Coaching has come from the worlds of reflective listening and dialogue, and also from the world of sports coaching, which is very directive. So this is our working definition. And what you can see is that it is non-advisory, that it is about the skills of the coach working with the topic that the coachee chose in order to help them bring out their awareness, bring out their approaches, bring out their adaptations of what they are going to do. There's no advice, there's no guidance, there's no leading questions. It's just helping someone come up with their own conclusions. And what you'll notice in the bottom of the slide is that coaching is not just for people who are struggling. Coaching is not just for difficult issues, but coaching is also for people who are growing, people who are stretching, people who are already highly skilled. And that's really important. Using coaching very well allows anyone who wants to engage in coaching to unlock and discover what it means to grow and develop, what it means to overcome their challenges and their obstacles. So we've got a couple of definitions there, a coaching culture and what we mean by coaching. And as we say, there are many ways to grow and develop a school, so why coaching? Why coaching culture? There are three areas, I think, three areas that we can choose to focus on that help us understand some of the dilemmas that schools have and some of the ways to overcome them. So on this slide, we show three of them. The first one relates to teaching practice. Many teachers value autonomy. They want to be able to be autonomous. They want to be able to teach in the way that they see fit, providing it goes along with best practice and evidence. School leaders often want consistency. They may want to give their teachers their head, but they want a consistency of standard. They want a consistency of approach. What coaching does is it allows a teacher to bring their own individual approach to whatever the pedagogic practice is in their school. and it offers the opportunity to grow and develop. It offers the opportunity to make sure that you are using in good practice in a way that suits you. The second one, workload versus well-being. We know the pressures, we know the strains that teachers and students are under in terms of workload. Coaching does not reduce workload in itself, but what it does, it helps our teachers and our students make sense of it. It helps them understand what they're doing well. It helps them understand what they could do differently, and then it allows for change. And that's really important, because allowing for change is going to let our colleagues, whoever's being coached, grow and develop. And yes, workload may get reduced as an impact, but actually managing the workload is a priority. And managing it within the context of well-being is particularly a priority. And this third one, curriculum versus student skills. So what we have here is the challenge of curriculum, the challenge of having to cover a lot of information in quite short periods of time, but also knowing that students need to grow, students need to develop, and they need to be able to respond in a really strong way. Not just learning the content, but also being skilled enough and believing in themselves enough in order to be able to respond to the curriculum. And coaching gives that opportunity. Coaching gives the opportunity to explore. Coaching gives the opportunity to grow, develop, and change our beliefs before we even look at the curriculum. So they're the three areas. That's why we think it's really worth investing and growing and developing a coaching culture. Let's consider where. Where might we use our coaching? You probably are picking up that it's about teachers and it's about students, but it's also about the third area. It's about leaders as well. So let's start with that. Let's start with coaching for school leaders. Head teachers, think about who you talk to. Who do you talk to when you want to share your thoughts, share your reflections, share your worries and anxieties as well as your aspirations? Perhaps you talk to your chair of governors. Perhaps you talk to your leadership team. Perhaps you talk to another trusted colleague or a partner or a friend at home. Those people might have the time and the focus and the energy to support you and to support you really well. But they might not. They might be stretched themselves. They might be challenged themselves. And you may feel too vulnerable to share everything you want to share. So that's where a coach can come in. And many head teachers these days are deploying coaches to be able to explore some of the issues and some of the challenges that they have. Sharing on this slide the experience of Siobhan Allen, who I've coached a number of times over a few years in 2 different head teacher roles. I think her comments speak for herself. The idea that she was able to stretch, the idea that she wasn't looking for answers from me, she had the answers within herself, and the idea that she had the time and space to grow and develop. So head teachers can learn really well how to develop themselves and what their great ideas are when they get coached. Let's hear from a head teacher. Let's hear from Sue Webb, who is in our team, who has got experiences of being coached as a head teacher.
Hi, I'm Sue Webb. I'm an educator, a professional coach, a regular coachee, and a former head teacher. So when I left headship, I knew I wanted to continue to make a very positive difference to the education system and the people in it. So I was really inspired by the impact of the coaching I'd had as a school leader, and I felt that I could really make a significant contribution by becoming the coach myself. I really think that school leadership is one of the most complex and challenging jobs that any person can do. That level of responsibility and accountability on your shoulders is immense, and you have to be highly skilled in so many aspects of business as well as in education. And that space that a great coach creates is one where you feel held and safe and not judged and supported. And in that space, you can be reflective, creative, and also challenged to dig really deep and find solutions to the problems and issues that are in front of you. Sometimes they are you. With my coach, I was able to see beyond that mountain of workload and pressure in front of me and move to a space of deeper and much more insightful thinking. I learned so much about myself that I couldn't see clearly in trying to work out alone or with friends or with colleagues. So I passionately believe that every school leader should have a coach to work with on a regular basis. And I know it's sometimes seen as a luxury, especially when budgets and time are so tight. But working with a really good coach is far from a luxury. I would actually suggest it's an essential for the amazing people who are in the front line of education.
So you can hear from Sue that there's a great deal of importance and weight put on having some coaching as a head teacher. She talked about the benefits. It's really clear, isn't it, that using coaching very well is a huge advantage for head teachers because of the workload, because of the pressure, but also because of their aspirations. And Sue is a great example of a head teacher who then chose to learn to be a coach. And she is using her coaching very well, supporting other head teachers, but also she now trains head teachers and other school leaders to be coaches. And we've got a great case study, a great example of where a big organisation is starting to do exactly that. The Independent Association of Prep Schools, IAPS, is the biggest trade association for primary schools in the independent sector in the UK. They've recognised that new in post head teachers have lots of challenges, and they've decided that one of the ways they want to support them is to offer them coaching regularly for their first year in post. So what they've done is that they've given every new head teacher, 75 or so each year, an experienced and qualified coach who will coach them every few weeks for their first year in post. They're fully funding this program because they really value the opportunity of coaching for head teachers. And what's very interesting about this project is rather than going externally to industry or elsewhere to find their coaches, they've looked within their own organisation and they're training experienced head teachers within their school network to be those very coaches. So these experienced head teachers learn to be great coaches, they get a coaching qualification, and then they use their coaching skills, not just in their own schools, but also by coaching their fellow heads who are new in post. So these new in post heads get the great benefit of being coached by a skilled coach who happens to be a head teacher. There are so many wins from this project that the benefits go throughout. 2 sets of schools, 2 sets of head teachers. It's a really strong model for future ways of developing coaching within schools. If a head teacher receives coaching and if a head teacher trains as a coach, they're much more likely to commit to coaching and to creating a coaching culture. That's what we've seen. And talking of head teachers who are committing to creating a coaching culture, we're going to hear from Peter Hopkinson now. Peter's also in our team, and during his time in headship, he did many things in order to create a coaching culture in his schools. So let's listen to Peter.
The process of adopting a coaching culture in the school where I was head not only brought about the expected positive change in how colleagues were supported, but it also impacted on many areas of how the school was organised and led, and on teaching and learning. The coaching mentality that we developed led to a re-evaluation of our organisational culture and a redesign of how leadership was perceived and worked within the school. We went about reassessing and then rewriting our core values, ensuring consistency and transparency. And we then used these values as key drivers for developing the school culture and for improving professional behaviour and relationships. It was then really gratifying for me as a head to observe how much better we became at assessing and taking risks, how colleagues felt more empowered to share knowledge with each other, and as a leadership team, how we were able to share more insights and new innovations with colleagues, governors and parents. We also developed a shared model of leadership that was adopted by leaders at all levels, and this enabled colleagues to be better leaders and for us as a senior leadership team to identify future leaders. This strong commitment to coaching meant that we were also better able to support our leaders, with those regular conversations raising our awareness and understanding of their motivation to grow and develop in their roles. Appraisal therefore shifted from what was a very traditional fixed point approach where targets would be discussed and reviewed annually to a model that saw each member of the senior leadership team acting as a coach for a team of teachers, all of whom had leadership roles. Ring-fenced time was created every half-term for coach and coachee to meet, resulting in a much greater sense of mutual trust, which in turn led to leaders becoming more proactive and much less reliant on a traditional mentoring relationship. So I was particularly pleased with how these interactions between colleagues became much more focused and meaningful because of this approach. Coaching also led to a much more collaborative structure. Decision-making processes became clearer and better defined, and leaders moved away from traditional position-focused processes to being facilitators of shared decision-making. Coaching also enabled leaders across the school to work much more closely together and to take a much more active role in developing each other. Undoubtedly, in adopting a coaching culture, we were able as a school to successfully implement a significant process of transformation and change. The challenge of such a project was quite significant and not without its difficulties, but the coaching culture we created enabled us to navigate the journey in a much more agile, positive and ultimately successful way. A shining example of this was the work carried out rewriting the taught and pastoral curriculums, a monumental task but one that was made much easier, underpinned as it was by a coaching culture.
There's a pretty long list there, isn't there, of things that Peter did in Portsmouth in order to be able to create a coaching culture. I'd like to dwell on just one of those things, and that's the appraisal process. Those of you who work in the UK may remember that in about 2012, there were lots of policy changes, lots of government changes, new performance management, new performance-related pay, appraisal and capability, new teacher standards, and all of those led schools to looking at their performance management or their appraisal process and seeing if they were any good. And schools discovered what teachers had known for many years was that they were not that effective, generally speaking, with some exceptions, of course. Generally speaking, not that effective and not that liked. They became a bit of a tick box exercise without very much impact. So along with Osiris, we trained 400 schools to change their policies and to change their processes and to skill up their appraisers. And what they did was they trained their appraisers so that they could use their coaching skills in the appraisal conversation. So rather than being performance managed, the performance management appraisal conversation became a coaching conversation where the appraisee, the teacher, could talk about their strengths, could talk about the areas that they weren't so good at and could set their own targets within the umbrella of the whole school target system. And what we found in these schools was that when they engaged in it, teachers started liking the appraisal process. Teachers started seeing that the appraisal process helped them to improve on their teaching practice. And that was really big and really important. And of course, school leaders really liked it as well. And that was particularly important because then there was a wider buy-in. So that leads us really nicely on to thinking about teachers, teaching and coaching. Kerry Warshawski is the final member in our team you're going to hear from today. And Kerry is a teaching specialist and a school leader who has been very interested in the role of coaching in pedagogy. She's going to explain some of her approaches.
There is a tension in secondary schools between teachers craving autonomy and senior leadership requiring consistency. Expert teacher coaching seeks to ease this tension. In schools, expert teachers are experts due to their ability, not their years of experience. Novice teachers, conversely, may be experienced but lack ability in observable areas in the science of learning. In my school, we use Teach Like a Champion, Doug Lemov, among others. John Whitmore states that coaching aims to unlock a person's, or a teacher's, potential to maximise performance. Expert teaching coaches, trained in the science of learning, and a standard set of skills underpinned by the ask, don't tell approach to coaching, use this 6-step model. Praise, coach, progress point, coach, practice, coach. The expert teaching coach identifies an area of best practice, X, and coaches the novice to understand and demonstrate why. Questions like, What does the science of learning say about X? Or what impact does X have on learning? And the probe, tell me more. Similar questions are asked when the progress point is identified. Novices are then coached to provide a solution based on the science of learning. Prompts like, tell me about a time when you have overcome something similar, or what difference to your practice will addressing X make now? Others could be used. Finally, the expert teaching coach will model the technique identified by the novice, and they will deliberately practice. The session ends with the coach asking the novice how they intend to implement their new technique and overcome any self-identified obstacles. A strong expert teaching coach will not default to mentoring, but is prepared to end the session or coach the novice to do more research. The expert teaching coach knows the novice has the knowledge and skills to improve their own practice. The novice teacher becomes an expert through granular peer-to-peer coaching. And SOT, senior leadership, trusts the model as teachers own how to develop as teachers, but not how they teach.
So what you can hear from Kerry is that coaching needs to be blended with other things. We coach over here. We give some direct guidance over here. We encourage reflection over there. We share best practice over here. And we find that when school teachers and managers of school teachers are skilled as coaches, is that they don't mishmash all of those different areas. They coach here. They give guidance over there. They reflect and share best practice over here. So that gives the teacher a great opportunity to reflect while they're being coached, but it also gives the leader a great opportunity of sharing best practice when they are in their transmission phase. And it works really well and really strongly, and there's a win all round for both the teacher and also the whole school. And the other beneficiaries, by the way, are the students. So let's look at the students as our final area of focus for coaching. Students have this pressure of getting through curriculum, of getting through school life, of knowing that they have to become good and strong learners. Many students do very well, many students also struggle. I worked as a learning mentor for 6 years in a challenging secondary school in London. And although we were mentoring rather than coaching, we mostly coached, we mostly listened, we mostly drew out strengths from our students, and we mostly encouraged them to come up with their own answers. The mantra was barriers to learning. What was in their way? What couldn't they do? What did they struggle with? How could they overcome them? And by listening and by giving them the space and by letting them reflect, they probably resolved 80% of their challenges. A bit of mentoring support took them towards more success. So coaching can be deployed for students either by pastoral staff, as I was, or by teaching staff who are given time and training so that they can use coaching for both personal but also academic type of coaching to help them focus on their studies as well as focusing on their confidence and their beliefs. But it can be done by students. If we train students to do peer coaching, it also can have a powerful impact. We've seen successful peer coaching go on from year 3 onwards, from 9-year-olds onwards. The opportunity to listen to and be listened to by another person is really powerful. So we've looked at those 3 areas of leadership, of teaching, of students. Let's reflect perhaps on some obstacles. Few obstacles that we need to keep out of our way so that we can create a coaching culture. We need to work on consistency of teaching practice. We need to make sure that coaching isn't an excuse for avoiding good pedagogic practice. We're lucky that nowadays with Hattie and others, the evidence base is so strong. We know what good teaching practice is. So coaching will allow teachers to be able to use good teaching practice in the way that fits them best. Time, of course, is a big challenge. But the upfront time of training people to become coaches pays off because the coaches grow and develop and they become autonomous. and they don't need to keep coming back for further support, further guidance, and they need less management, whether they're students or whether they're teachers. There is this question here of whether it's too big a step, too big a change. Sometimes schools in extreme circumstances don't have the time and energy to be able to focus on coaching. So probably they need to wait till they get over some hump in the road, such as a bad inspection, such as many changes of personnel in a short period of time. We still think coaching can be effective in those moments, but it might not be the best time to take on big projects. So I promised some next steps. There are some downloads for you here. There's an audit to see how coach ready your school is. There's some guidance on coaching for teaching and also on coaching by leaders. And of course, we're happy to take calls and emails to be able to support and engage with you about how to create a coaching culture in your school. Final words. This is not the only way. This is not the only way to develop school, to develop a culture, to develop students, to develop teachers. But it is a strong way. And it links so strongly into the beliefs of schools of being a lifelong learning environment for everyone, for students, for teachers and for leaders. And it can have such a strong impact on both well-being and attainment that it's well worth engaging in. Good luck with creating a coaching culture, and I'll look forward to hearing from you.